Welcome, fellow wine lovers. This is the Wine Ghost podcast. I'm Mate Bosch, a certified sommelier and seeker of hidden stories behind the most mysterious drink in history. For more information or direct contact, please look for the Wine Ghost on Instagram and Facebook. But now, please grab a glass, get comfortable, and listen to how the day's ghosts get out of the bottle. Riesling from Württemberg, southern Germany. Oh yes, although the Rams Valley, or Ramstal, has a long tradition of producing excellent Rieslings, it still remains a hidden gem for most Riesling lovers worldwide. This time I was lucky enough to talk to one of the best producers in the area, Moritz Haidle from the Karl Häder Winery. After a meaningful father and son conversation, Moritz chose to follow his ancestors' path instead of a design career and took over the winery from his father in 2014. Since then, they have become certified organic farmers and they are in transition to a biodynamic one. He has also been aiming to minimize new oak influences in his wines and reduce the overall alcohol content in his portfolio. 40 years ago, his father also pioneered in creating world-class Lembergers, which is the same grape as Blaufränkisch or Cake-Frankosch, and Moritz has been continuing on his path ever since. We also tasted 3 of his wonderful wines together via Skype and talked about the terroir, barrel usage, how his grapes have found some sort of inner peace recently, how the climate changes, about his Trollinger pet nut, and as always much more. Super positive, fun guy with stunning wines. I also uploaded a tasting video to YouTube featuring the Haidle wines, so watch it via the link below if you want some visuals and some subjective opinion about his wines. But now, fill your glass and listen to another wine wizard. So, hi Moritz, welcome to the show. How are you today, sir?
Hi, good, thank you.
So, what are you doing today?
Today we were cutting out the cranes for the frost, because for the insurance we have to wait until 1st of May. And so because we are really late and the vineyard is growing really fast already, we started this week already, even if it's not the 1st of May yet, but we started to cut out the frost cranes. I'm not sure if this is the right translation for in English, but we have one safety crane or one safety chute. Is it called a chute or crane? I'm not sure. We have that as a security. If we have frost problem, then we have a second chute that we can use for the year.
Mm-hmm. When do you usually have frost? In the autumn, do you mean, or in this time of the year?
No, in springtime we can have late frost, which is the dangerous one. I mean, in February it doesn't really matter, but let's say in April. When the vines are already growing, and then if we have frost, then it's pretty bad, because then the young shoots, they just die, and the new ones usually don't have any grapes. So we have one shoot. I'm not sure if it's called shoot or crane, to be honest, but we have one extra standing high, and we don't bind it down yet. So if we have frost, then we have a second, because usually the frost is a bit further down, and then we have a second crane that we can use if the frost harms the first crane. The first crane, and then we cut the crane. If it's harmed by frost, we cut it off and bind down the second one.
And are you doing it now alone, or how can you get help these days in the vineyard?
Well, this time of the year we usually we work with our normal employees. We don't have people working from other countries. We usually do that during summertime, but also we mainly work with retired people from the village and with a lot of friends from the family. And if we need help, we usually work with those people. And then only during summertime and during harvest, we have two people coming from other countries. So we are not that. It's not that necessary for us to have those workers coming, because we already have some good or enough employees to get the work done. Usually, yeah.
And how big your vineyard area is now?
We have 23 hectares.
You already started the conversion to biodynamic viticulture, right? This year or last year?
No, this year. And actually, I forgot to mention that. It's a good point, because in the morning today, we were digging out our preparates for the 500. And we were digging out the horns, the cow horns today.
And looking good?
Yeah, it looks good. And it was the first time that we've done it, so we are quite excited about it. And yeah, we cannot wait to do the dynamization and to bring it out.
Okay, I will ask about that later, because I think it's very interesting and good to hear that you also turn your winery or your vineyards into biodynamic. But maybe just a little bit about the winery and the history maybe of the winery, because it's quite a respectable and old estate in Württemberg, right? Your grandfather started it.
Yes, my grandfather started it. And so for the Württemberg relations, or at least for the Rems Valley, we are one of the oldest one in the Rems Valley. But compared with other wine regions, the winery is quite young, because it's only the third generation. That's not that such a long time. If you look at Pfalz or Rheinhessen, or even other parts of Württemberg, like Heilbronn area, wineries can be much older. But in our region, it was always tradition to be part of a cooperative.
But your grandfather didn't join any cooperatives, right?
No, as far as we know, he was never part of the cooperative. He was always making his own bulk wine, and he was selling bulk wine to the restaurants directly. And that was before the war. And then after the war, he declared it as a winery. And from 1949, we were only selling bottled wines then.
And do you know what was the motivation behind establishing a winery?
No, actually, I don't know his motivation, because I never met him. He died quite young, and I just know that. I mean, it was usual or very common to have vineyards. Everybody in the village pretty much had vineyards, but you usually brought the grapes to the cooperative, and then they were making the wine together or selling the grapes together. And I don't know why my grandfather wanted to do it on his own, but I'm happy that he did.
I'm sure. I am too, because I already tried your wines and they are beautiful. So. And
they were drinking a lot back in the days, and also my grandfather was big in drinking, and he also was a very communicative guy. Communicative guy. So he he knew a lot of people, and he had a lot of friends, and he knew many people from the restaurants, for example, and that's why he always had enough customers to sell his bulk wine to the restaurants. And
then your father took over, right?
Yes, my father took over quite early, because, as I mentioned, my grandfather died really young. And my father was only in his early 20s when he took over the winery. And I think this was in 1968. And he actually started with 2.5 hectares and then made it big to 23 hectares until today. And he was working in the winery for more than 50 years.
Wow. And what is he doing now? Is he still helping, or?
Yeah, he's still helping. He's helping me in the office and doing a lot of stuff just to take some of my work and to make my life a bit easier. He's taking care of, for example, ordering labels, or ordering bottles, ordering corks and screw caps, so that everything is ready when we need to start bottling. He's taking care of such things, for example.
And he's also always the guy you could go for advice to, I guess, right?
Yes, of course, yeah. I'm really happy to have him, because we can always talk. I mean, when before it was clear that I will take over the winery, we were also having a lot of fights, and maybe sometimes not having the same opinion, like fathers and sons sometimes do. But since I took over the winery, or since I'm working in the winery, we are working together, and it's going really well. And even if we're not having the same opinion, he usually, if we have a discussion, in the end of the discussion, he always says, "Okay, you have to continue the winery for the next 50 years, and you have to deal with your idea, or you have to deal with what you are doing now. You have to deal with that for the next 40 years or 50 years or 30 years, whatever." So it's not going to be my problem anymore. So it's your choice. Do what you think is the right thing to do. And even if it's not his opinion, he always lets me do what I decide is the best.
He also started to use barriques in the 80s already in the region, right? Or in the late 80s.
But he was not the very first, because the very first guys were the people from the Häder group. They started, I think, in '86, and my father started in '87. He was still a bit kind of revolutionary with that, but he was also one of the first who started to reduce the yield to get higher quality, which was at that time was totally crazy, because people said he must be crazy if he's not trying to get as many grapes as possible, because if you want to earn any money, then you need a lot of wine. And my father, from the beginning, was always against quantity, but going for quality.
And then you continued that, right?
I'm trying, yeah.
Yeah. And when did you took over the winery?
In 2014.
And what has changed since then?
We have changed to become organic since 2014, but also I'm using less new oak for the red wines. So if we make barrique wines, aging in barrique oak barrels, we are using less and only very little parts of new oak. And also I'm trying to reduce the level of alcohol, which in some wines or some years didn't work that successfully, but we're getting better now.
Why do you want to reduce the alcohol, for example?
Because I think that nowadays it's not that fashionable anymore to have high alcohol levels, and also I think it's way more enjoyable, and it's way more drinkable. If you have a lower alcohol level, then you are happy to open a second bottle, and you can enjoy the wine much more. You don't get tired that early. For example, if you have a heavy red wine, I feel sometimes that you get tired, not just tired by being tired, but also getting tired of the wine. I think if the wine is too heavy, and in Germany we have a word, it translates into drink flow. If there is no drink flow in your wine, you just drink one glass and then you are done, and you feel tired of the wine and you don't want to continue drinking. And I feel with a lower alcohol level, this doesn't happen that often.
What is maybe the level which you wouldn't go above?
Well, I think, I mean, it's already quite high, but 13.5 should be the highest, I would say. Because above that, when it comes to 14, it can be very bitter. It's not necessarily like that. I also had wines with higher alcohol that were still quite enjoyable and still quite fresh, which was surprising for me. There are some excuses, I would say, or some wines that are still very delicious, even with higher alcohol levels. But in general, I think in general, the ones with low alcohol are more refreshing and a bit more easygoing. Which doesn't mean that they can still be complex, because people usually say that wines with low alcohol level, they don't have the complexity, but I think this is not true.
And was it always like obvious that you're gonna lead the winery into the future, or
No.
because no?
No, not at all. In the beginning, when I was still in school, on high school, I didn't want to take over the winery at all. I didn't want to go into the wine business. I was totally not interested in wine, and I wanted to become a car designer.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, that's completely on the other side.
Different thing, yeah.
So what changed you?
I did after high school. Well, actually, during high school, in my last year of high school, my father and I we had a father and son conversation, which was the only father-son conversation that we ever had. And so he asked me if I want to take over, and I said, actually, I'm not sure. I feel like I want to do something else because I was always good in drawing and painting, and I would say that I was kind of creative, and so I always thought that I should do something which goes in the direction of designing stuff. Um, and then but on the other side, I didn't want to quit the family business and the family tradition. And so we decided that I can make 1 year where I can get some work experience and do some internships in both directions. And then I did my first internship at Rudolf Fürst Winery in Franconia. And that was actually the reason why I decided to do winemaking because people were very friendly and they showed me a whole different side of wine that I never a perspective that I never looked at it from before. And I learned a lot about wine, and I realized that it's actually much more interesting than I always thought. And also the internship that I did afterwards in a car manufactory. It was another manufactory, of course, but they were making some parts for tuning companies and stuff like that. And I had some really bad experience there. And after that, I decided, okay, I want to do the rest of the year, I only want to do internships in the wine industry. And so I went to a winery in Australia, and I was working in a wine lab back in Germany again. And then I decided to do an apprenticeship. And I did that at Weingut Seeger in Heidelberg, or Leimen, next to Heidelberg, and Weingut Künstler in the Rheingau. And after the apprenticeship, I decided that I definitely want to take over the winery now. And so I started studying in Geisenheim. And then 2014, I was finished with studying. And so I came home to take over the winery. And I also did some work experiences or some practical semester, international semesters. I was doing one harvest during studying in California, in Sonoma County, Sonoma Coast, and one was in France, Burgundy.
And what were maybe the biggest learnings during these harvests and working experiences abroad?
I would say in California, I learned that what people think of California is most of the time it's not true. And I was in a really high quality winery. They made really delicious Pinot and really delicious Chardonnay, and they had the really Burgundy style in their wines. They were quite light and not as heavy as you expect that from a wine from California. But that was probably also because they were so close to the coast, and it was a bit of kind of a colder climate. That was Flowers Winery, and I still love their wines, but they are really hard to get in Europe, or at least in Germany. It's almost impossible to find their wines. And they were working with a really high sense of quality, and everything we did by gravity, and working organic, also experimenting with biodynamics at that time when I was there. 2012 was that. So that was surprising for me because I was afraid that it could be a mass production winery, And in Burgundy, I was surprised I have realized and learned that in Burgundy, the whole winemaking thing is really, really, really traditional, and there's not a lot which has changed in the last 100 years, I would say. I mean, they are always working really, really traditional, but still, they make one of the world's best wines, I would say.
And which wineries did you work at?
In Burgundy, that was Domaine Daudet, and in Savigny-le-Beaune, and yeah, in California, it was Flowers Winery, as I mentioned earlier, and in Australia, that was before the apprenticeship. In Australia, I was in Mansfield at the Delatite Winery. They were really famous for their Riesling and for the Gewürztraminer, actually.
I also asked this question because I kind of expected this answer, that because in Australia they also produce a lot of nice Rieslings.
Yeah.
Which is also one of your specialties, right?
Right. Yeah. We have nowadays we have over 50% of Riesling. 50% of more than 50% of the whole of all the vineyards are planted with Riesling now. You
also turn your winery or only your vineyard into
organic? Everything. The winery and the vineyards. Everything is organic. Yeah.
And was that a big change for you?
Actually not, because we 2 years before we started doing that, we already stopped using herbicides, and that is the biggest part of the challenge if you're located in Württemberg, because we have really heavy soils. It's tough to work without herbicides, but we started doing that. And once we realized that we can actually manage it, we continued doing that for 2 years, and then we decided to do the rest of the certification, which was only the spraying, and the spraying is not such a big deal. I mean, it's still a bit harder, and you have to know what you're doing, but yeah, the herbicides thing is the main problem, actually. And also we were not using any mineralic fertilizer. We were not using them. We were only using our composts and organic fertilizers for 10 years already. And so we had quite a low yield in general already. And yeah, so it was not such a big change anymore. Working without herbicides already, and using the own compost as fertilizer already. So it was only the spraying that we needed to change back then. Yeah.
And since maybe 2014, have you also noticed a big change in terms of weather or microclimate?
Well, the weather in the last years in general has changed a lot. Like, we have really dry years. Like, even this year is starting really dry already. And 2018 was a hot and dry year. 2019 was a dry year. 2015 was a dry year. So I think we can realize a big change in weather already. And microclimate, I think so too. I have the impression, besides that since we have changed to organic, that our grapes are much more healthier, and also the vines are more
resistant, right?
Yeah, more resistant, and maybe even healthier. It seems like they have some sort of inner peace, and yeah, it just makes much more fun, I think, and it feels good. It feels better to work organic, and when you can see that you have very healthy grapes as well. And I would even say that most of the years our grapes are more healthy than some of the conservative winemaking people have grapes. Especially in the last years, sometimes you could really see a big difference. Yeah. So I'm 100% sure that it was the right decision that we have made.
Mm-hmm. And how is the change into biodynamics? Because that you are also in the transition. So how is this?
Well, this is also not it's we already did parts of that in 2014. For example, since 2014, we are pruning after the moon. We are in general working with the moon calendar from Maria Thun. Since 2014, we started doing that. Also in the cellar. And the new part for us now is working with our own preparates, like the 500 or the 501, that are preparates that we haven't used so far. So we just started doing that last year. I mean, we digged in the 500. We buried that last year, and now we digged it out today. So yeah, it's still new for us, and we have to learn a lot. But it's interesting and it makes fun.
And what are these preparates? What are these methods behind the numbers? Because maybe not all of us know these.
So the 500 is basically it's in cow horns, and we put some cow poo into the horns, and then you dig that in you bury that in the vineyard, and you leave it there for about half a year, and then you can dig it out again, and then you empty the horns and use the compost that you have then, or like humus, and then you steer that in water to give it the dynamization. And then you spray that in the vineyard, and it gives a better connection from the plants to the soil, and it activates the soil basically. And you do that now this time of the year when the nature is getting active again, and in springtime when all the plants starting to grow, then you spray the 500 in the vineyard to tell the soil that the plants are growing now, and to activate the soil basically, and have a good conversation and a good connection between the plants and the soil.
And the other two?
The other two is the 501 is pepper stone in the horns. Basically the same thing, but you bury that in June. But I'm still learning about it. So maybe maybe I'm the wrong person to explain biodynamics at this time.
And where do you get the information from? From books or website, or do you have a consultant? Or
well, I'm using a bit more. I'm more looking in the internet. I have bought myself 3 books already, but it's really tough to read them. It's not like reading a crime story or something. It's a bit tough, and you have to be really concentrated to understand what you're actually reading. I already read a book about the moon calendar last year that was way more easy to understand and to follow. At least that was my impression. So I check more stuff in the internet. I ask other winemakers, other wineries, what they have for what they made for experience, and also our vineyard manager, who's working for 30 years now for us. He has a friend. She is also really into biodynamics, and so we also learn a lot from her. And she's explaining a lot to our vineyard manager, and then he tells me about it, and then we make the decision together what we are going to do and how we're going to do it. And and also we visited some like a lesson, like an event, which was a whole day from the VDP, especially about biodynamics. That was 1 or 2 years ago. And my vineyard manager and I, we went there and listened to the whole to the whole lesson. It was like a course, 1-day course of biodynamics. That was really interesting, and that was also part of the reason why we decided to finally continue the step towards biodynamics.
Are there a lot of vintners in Württemberg who is doing that?
Not so many. I think certified at the moment, I can think of 3. There may be some more that I have forgotten at the moment. But there is, for example, Schmalzried in the Rems Valley, and also Beurer, who is located in Stetten. He's probably the most famous one for biodynamic wine in Württemberg. And then there is also Weingut Unterfaden, which is working completely only producing natural wines. It's a really young and new winery, and he's also working for Demeter and working as a consultant for Demeter. And he also gave me a lot of advices so far. And if I have questions, he's usually the first guy who I call.
Okay, beautiful. Maybe before we talk a little bit about the terroir, I would try the first Riesling if it's okay with you, because they get warm. So that's the Stettener Riesling Schilfsandstein 2019. It's an Ortswein. Can you tell us a little bit about this wine?
Yeah. So Schilfsandstein translates into wheat sandstone in English. And I produce 2 different Ortsweins. The Schilfsandstein is the name of the soil, as I mentioned already. And we have all those vineyards sitting on the eastern part of the village. And for the other Ortswein, I use Riesling vineyards from the western part of the village. So in the east, we have the much more warmer climate. We have we would say the better vineyards, actually, because most of the vineyards are also part of the Pulvermecher, which is the most famous Riesling vineyard in the region. Yeah, and so in this wine, we usually have a more mineralic style, while on the other Ortswein, it's much more on the fruity side. And but in this one, it's really mineralic. You have like flintstone notes or like gunpowder notes, and it also has maybe a little reduction because it's sitting the whole time on the full lease until bottling, and we have bottled that in I think it was March or maybe February, quite early. Usually we bottle later, but we have a lack of Riesling in the last couple of years, so we were forced to bottle a bit earlier than we actually wanted to. And yeah, and I also try to make sure that it is wild fermented, and I try to make sure that this is always the driest wine in the whole portfolio. So usually it has 0 point something or 1 point something grams of residual sugar, and usually it's below 2 grams of residual sugar. And that's why it feels sometimes a bit strong on the acidity, but it's not too bad actually. In the other Ortswein, we usually have more acidity, but you don't feel it that intense because you have some residual sugar to balance it out. And in the Schilfsandstein wine, the residual sugar is completely missing out, so the acidity is more present.
But already on the nose, I almost get this. I sometimes get in the Mosel or maybe sometimes in the Rheingau this almost plasticky. It's really fresh, almost herbal, really refreshing nose already, and also these zesty notes, more like not like lemon flesh, but more like zest or lime.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Almost citric. Oh wow, that wakes me up. Yeah, it's really striking acidity, but it's bone dry. Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, but it's organic and ripe acidity, so it's not scraping my mouth or something. So
yeah,
and it really stays in the back of my mouth. So it's a qualitative acidity. This is how I call this.
Yeah, I think it's around 8 grams of acidity. Yeah. And
So how can you do that in Württemberg? Because it's quite a warm region, especially in the last years.
yeah, that's true. But also the Rems Valley is kind of a bit of a colder region in Württemberg. And then in Stetten, we are not directly sitting in the Rems Valley. We are located in a side valley. And the thing is that the Rems Valley is going from east to west, and the most of the vineyards are facing south, so most of them are quite warm, and that's why we have a lot of red wines like Trollinger and Lemberger also in the Rems Valley. But Stetten in the side valley is facing, or is the valley is going from north to south, and so the vineyards are mostly facing to either the west side or the east side. And there is only a few little vineyards that are facing south, but there's also a lot which is almost facing in the northern direction. So all this together, and the fact that we have really poor soils with not a lot of not too many nutrients in the soil. So for example, Schilfsandstein or pebbles, Kieselsandstein, pebble sandstone, they don't have a lot of nutrients, and they also are not really good in holding and saving water. So that if it's raining, the water just runs right through it, and that's a reason why also in the Schilfsandstein wine, the vines have to dig really deep with their roots to get any water or nutrients, and that's why the Riesling from Stetten is in general usually quite mineralic, and which is really unlikely compared to the rest of Württemberg, because usually the western part is a bit warmer. So the Riesling from Württemberg in general is more fruity and has a bit less acidity, I would say.
And Riesling likes to suffer a little bit in the vineyard, right? So
yeah, definitely.
And no malolactic fermentation, right?
It made the parts. Some barrels have done malolactic fermentation because of the wild fermentation. Sometimes the alcoholic fermentation starts struggling and makes a pause, and then in the meantime, malolactic fermentation takes over. And once malolactic fermentation is finished, then usually, if you are lucky, but most of the time I was lucky, the alcoholic fermentation continues and finishes. But sometimes it takes a bit longer, and sometimes there happens the malolactic fermentation, sometimes it doesn't happen, but that changes every year, and some barrels are different than others, and so some of the barrels in this wine have made the malolactic fermentation, yes, but it's only 1/3 of the whole quantity.
And these are also vegan wines, right? So no fining, I guess.
Yes, no fining. No findings in general. It's not my policy or my religion to live vegan. I'm not living vegan at all. I mean, I try to live healthy, but I eat meat. But it's my philosophy to not use any findings or stuff that's not supposed to be in the wine. And then since we were working together with a small shop in Stuttgart for vegan stuff, and they wanted to work with our wines, and then they asked me if the wines would be vegan, and I said yes. They started buying them, and then they mentioned that it would be nice if we would declare that on the label so that their customers would believe them. And so we started to also print vegan wine on the label, but only on the backside, and only very small. And because a lot of people also are making fun of that, which is a bit sad, because I think everybody should be allowed to do whatever he likes to do, as long as it doesn't hurt anybody else. And but for some reason, some people think that vegan wine is more like a joke because every wine is vegan for them, because they don't know that you can use findings like gelatine in German, or fish, or even egg white can be used in winemaking, and most of the people don't know that, and they think, okay, wine is made from grapes, and grapes is not meat, so the wine is vegan already. And then you need to explain it to them.
And what about sulfur?
Sulfur, I'm trying to use only a small amount, but I still think that for traditional wine, sulfur is necessary. But I also like natural wines, and I also made natural wines by myself in 2014, in 2015, and in 2018, and in 2019.
Riesling?
Riesling I did the first time in 2018. I also made a Pet Nat from Trollinger in 2018, but it's not for sale yet. It's still sitting on the lease. And but the other years I always did it with Pinot Blanc. And I feel like Pinot Blanc is much more grateful for natural wines, because I think that Riesling, the tannins, the Gerbstoff, is too sharp. It's not so enjoyable. It's much more gentle with the Pinot Blanc, in my opinion.
And about the Trollinger, is it gonna be like a rosé Pet Nat or?
Yeah, it was actually the idea was to only have it for one day on the skins, But then when we were picking that, that was, I think it was a Saturday, and on that day, no, sorry, it was a Friday, and then we were supposed to press it on Saturday. But then on that Saturday, a lot of stuff went wrong in the winery, and everybody was in a really bad mood, and we were all very unhappy. And so we decided to wait another day. And so at least in the end, it was 2 or 3 days on skins, and it's much more red than I wanted it to be. But it's okay. I expect it. I mean, I accept it. I tolerate that.
When can we see this wine on the market?
I'm not sure yet. In the beginning, I didn't want to do the dego. What's the English word for that? Degouchieren?
Yeah, I don't know. We always use the French word, degorgement.
Okay. I didn't want to do the degorgement, but most of the bottles they are very foamy, and you have a lot of gushing, and half of the bottle, at least half of the bottle, is empty after the gushing, and so I decided to at least do a little degorgement, and But now I'm still giving it some time on the lease, so I'm not sure when it will be released. It might, maybe, I don't know, maybe half a year, maybe longer. Actually, I could try it again now and see how it tastes now. But yeah, it's in the basement, and I usually keep forgetting about it. And then I just leave it, and then I remember it, but then I'm busy and have other things to do, and then I forget it again.
Then it's hopefully a nice surprise. It's always good to have in the pocket.
Yeah, I mean, it's not bad to have a long time on the lease.
Yeah, yeah, it gives some structure and more mouthfeel.
Yeah, exactly.
And maybe just about the barrel usage, because your father started with barriques, but you said you don't really want to use new barrels, or you want to put them in the background, maybe.
Yeah, well, at least I'm reducing it for every wine to pretty much only 1/3 of the total amount. Only 1/3 is in new oak now. And I keep the older barrels for much longer. We usually used to sell them after 4 years, and now I only sell a couple of barrels every year, and I try to keep as many as I can. But the problem is now that I'm running out of space. And and also since Riesling, the amount of Riesling was growing so strong. I mean, Riesling was always already during my father's time, because Stettener is a village that has a long tradition for Riesling. So that already on my grandfather's time, and already on my father's time, the Riesling was the main variety in the winery, but then my father was quite successful with his Lemberger red wines, and that's why he continued with planting a lot of red wines. And now I'm going back to Riesling more, and so actually I don't need that many barrique barrels anymore. And I'm really happy that for the Riesling, for example, even also for the Schilfsandstein, we are using old barrels that some of them are still from my grandfather, and the oldest ones are from the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
But they are not barrique barrels; they are traditional Riesling barrels from the area from here. And yeah, I really love working with those barrels because you get so much structure, and I think it's amazing that a barrel with that age still is not leaking and still is very well to work with.
And how big they are?
They're totally different. We have some Stückfässer and Halbstück, so we have 1,200 liters. We have double Stück, which is 2,400 liters. We have Halbstück, which is around 600 liters. But we also have some barrels that were produced in the cellar to fit in the perfect corner. And so we have some barrels with totally different size, like 2,900 or 700, or one is even the biggest one is 4,500 liters.
And how does it affect the wine? Because sometimes I feel it's not so easy in a blind tasting to differentiate between wines that spent maybe even young times, or especially young wines that spent some times in a neutral oak barrels or in stainless steel, or maybe partially. Then it's almost impossible to tell, I think. So what do you think it gives to wine?
I think it gives it more structure, and it ripes a bit nicer. So it's aging better, it's aging nicer, and I feel like the wines are much more round and enjoyable a bit earlier maybe, but also have more complexity so that they can last longer in the end. But also depends on if we are talking about Riesling or talking about red wine. It totally makes a difference, because for red wine it's also very important to soften the tannins and to soften the whole wine in general. And for white wines, especially for Riesling, you can have maybe a much more fresher and more fruity wine if you have it in stainless steel, because it keeps it fresher, of course, because there is no air circulation or no air exchange. But I think that if you want to have a wine which is not on the fruity side but more
So if you keep a wine in a stainless steel tank, then it's more fruity, you say. But what happens then if you put it in a bigger oak barrel? What kind of aromas, or how do you expect
it can still be fruity by style, but I feel like in an old barrel, whether it's big or small, whether it's new oak or old oak, you get more body into the wine. And if you want to have a slim, or maybe slim is a bad word, but an elegant white wine, for example, you can sometimes have a better result in a stainless steel. Maybe not a better result, but it stays fresher, I would say, longer. And for barrel use, you have more body and I don't know, more like the food pairing style of wine. But this is more like a feeling that I have, nothing that I would describe as I don't know, nothing officially. It's just my opinion.
Then maybe I will try the next one, and then I try to put it into words. So the Stettener Häder Riesling 2018. What does Häder mean?
Häder is the name of the vineyard. It's Erste Lage. So this is the Premier Cru. This is on the other side of the village. So this is on the western part of the village, which is facing east, and this is definitely the colder side, because it only is getting sun in the afternoon. In the morning. It's only getting sun in the morning, and it's quite cold. It's also one of the vineyards that we pick the last. but at the same time, it's still quite fruity and has some fruity notes like ripe pear and maybe even some banana. And that's because of the soil, which is colored marl and gypsum coipera, and those are really rich soils with a lot of nutrients and good water management. And so even if this vineyard is colder, it still usually has more fruit than the side of Pulvermecher, because Pulvermecher is more mineralic and elegant, and Häder, in my opinion, has a bigger body and is a bit richer in everything pretty much.
And it also lower acidity, right? Do I feel it?
Yeah, but that's probably because of the vintage also. Because and this one has made 100% of malolactic fermentation.
And also maybe a bit more residual sugar, right? So it's almost like 5. So I feel something. So that's why
I think it's a 3 point something. But because of the low acidity, you feel
it's more balanced, maybe.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
Yeah, it's more like a fruit wine, I would guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it also lees aging, right?
Yes.
And did this wine spend some time in oak?
Yeah, both of them. They actually were in the same barrel. Okay. Well, I mean, 2018, the barrel that was used, or one of the barrels which was used, the main barrel was the same as we used in 2019 for the Schilfsandstein. Just a fun fact, but this was not on purpose. This just happened accidentally.
But it's also the nose. I would guess it's more complex. I already feel some white flower nose, like apricot blossom, and it's more.
Because also was at least almost a half a year longer fermentation, so longer lees contact, full lees contact, and also because of the 100% malolactic fermentation, that also gives it more body, more structure, and more deepness, if that is a word.
Yeah, I feel that. Yeah, and also on the more riper side of the fruits, maybe also kind of orangey or yellow apple, and
yeah, definitely, yeah.
Beautiful. So what kind of wines do you want to, or did you want to produce? What is your aim with this Riesling? Do you always look for a kind of Haidle style, or?
I try to have a small portfolio on the Rieslings, and for me it's important that every Riesling has its own flavor, its own style, and so you have each Riesling in the portfolio needs to be unique. That is my aim, and the Haidle style, or the style that I'm aiming for, is to have well-balanced Rieslings that can be either fruity but also more mineral. I actually prefer the mineral wines. I like them more than the fruity style Riesling. And I try to make them as elegant as possible and not too thick or too fat. And I want them to be good for drinking and good for pairing with food, for example. So I want to have both, a good drinking wine and a good food wine at the same time.
Yeah, I think they are. I will do some videos, record some videos for sure already today to cook some. So what do you recommend?
Good question. I really suck at cooking.
Okay. Then I'm gonna improvise again.
Yeah, maybe I would say maybe for the Schilfsandstein, best pairing would be everything which is with anything with fish, maybe, but also for the Häder, I would also recommend maybe some lamb.
Wow, that's a good idea. Okay.
Yeah, but I'm not good in cooking, so I always have to trust the cook.
Yeah, I'm not a cook either, so. But cooking is also good to experiment. You don't have too much to lose, you know.
Right, right. Especially now at Corona time, I learned a lot about cooking.
Right?
But I still prefer to go to the restaurants and get some takeaway food because sometimes I have really sad evenings with a really bad dish on my table.
Okay. And maybe just to talk about Pulvermecher, because that's maybe the most famous site what you have, right?
Yeah, right.
So why is it why does it particularly suits well the Rhine Riesling, or why is it the most special one in your vineyard?
I don't know. No, I'm just kidding. But it's by the tradition. It has always been like that. There is also the Stettener Brotwasser. People from Stetten would probably say that Brotwasser is even better, but it's maybe not as famous because it's a monopoly from the Duke of Württemberg, and so it's not that internationally known probably because there's only one winery selling it, and that's why Pulvermecher. There's a lot of wineries that are producing wines in Pulvermecher, and that's why Pulvermecher is probably more famous nowadays. And I think it's because we have a good explanation facing west southwest, so it's a bit warmer, which gives it a nice mix of cold climate, but still with enough sun to have a lot of structure in the wine. And I think it's also the soil, which is pebble sandstone, has the same situation pretty much like Schilfsandstein. So it's also really bad in saving the water and also doesn't have a lot of nutrients. But there is a lot of iron in the pebble sandstone. That's why you have a sort of reddish color in the soil. And I cannot tell why the terroir is tasting like that, but Pulvermecher always has its own flavor in my sense, in my feeling. The Pulvermecher usually tastes the same. Doesn't matter which winery it produces, and it's a flavor. It's an aroma that you cannot really describe. It's some sommeliers describe it as fennel or anise, which I don't really understand because I cannot feel that because I don't like fennel or anise for food. At least I'm not a big fan of that. But the wine I still like a lot, so I don't agree. Well, I cannot say that I don't agree, but I cannot really understand how so many sommeliers which don't know each other over so many years, they always keep bringing that up to me, and so I accept it now that the Pulvermecher must taste like fennel or anise.
And it doesn't sound that bad, so.
No, it's not bad. Yeah, but it's just funny because I never thought of that, but so many people are telling me that and bringing that up, and but to me, what is special, especially in Württemberg, because I never feel that in other Rieslings from the area, but in general, Pulvermecher also doesn't matter which winery produces. You have a really, it's first of all, it's much more elegant compared to other Rieslings from Württemberg. It's not so fruity, it's more mineral, it's more elegant, and the special thing is for me that in the aftertaste it is really long, and it always has this sort of saltiness. And the saltiness is really special for Pulvermecher, in my opinion.
But this wine, this Stettener Häder, has a really long aftertaste because I had my last sip like, I don't know, 4 minutes ago, or I don't know, but I still find it in the corners of my mouth.
Yeah. Well, I guess that
hiding.
Stetten has good Riesling sites, good Riesling vineyard sites, and I mean, by tradition, 100 years ago, I think I haven't mentioned that, but 100 years ago, there was almost only Riesling growing in Stetten, and then in the last, I don't know, maybe 50 years, people started to become more experimental. They started to plant a lot of different varieties, and now we have a big mix, like everywhere in Württemberg, but still Riesling is the main variety in Stetten. but we have a mix of all different varieties, and I always think, or I have realized in the last couple of years since I took over the winery, I have realized that I have I have with some varieties you have to do a lot to make a good wine. You have to put a lot of effort in. You need to have a low yield. You need to do a lot of work on the leaf management. And yeah, it's a lot of tough work. It's also tough to get the right picking point. And also in the cellar, you have to be really careful, and you have to take care of everything. You need to have the right pH. You need to have this and that. So many things that you need to take care of. And Riesling, I have the impression that it's always very easy. And best example is in 2018, where most of the winemakers needed to add some acidity or some acid, some wine acid, because the pHs were too high. Because of the warm and hot summer, and even in 2018 I did not have to add acid to one single Riesling. And that was for me the proof that back in the days people were already doing the right thing. And if Riesling is from Stettin and it's going so well here, then it's supposed to be the variety that we are planting here, in my opinion, at least. And that's why I think that we should in Stettin focus very hard on the Riesling.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, these were beautiful wines. And maybe just to talk about Lemberger or Blaufränkisch or Keekfrankosch, because I have this Stettener, also Häder, Lemberger 2018.
Yeah.
And can you tell us a little bit about this variety here? Because I think in Germany there are also like 2,000 hectares from this grape variety, and most of them are in Württemberg, right?
Yeah, exactly. Most of them are in Württemberg, but the tradition for Lemberger in the Rems Valley is not that old, actually. It's just like, I don't know, 40 years old, almost 40 years old. And my father was actually one of the first vintners who were planting Lemberger in the Rems Valley, and everybody was laughing at him at that time because people said in the Rems Valley, and especially in Stettin, this variety will never be ripe enough to make good wine. And then 20 years later, he was one of the most famous winemakers for the Lemberger. And yeah, the thing is that nowadays Lemberger, it's getting better again, but in the last years we were struggling selling Lemberger because everybody was thinking of cheap, fruity, and sweet red wines, because it very often got blended with Trollinger, and they made mass production wine, shitty wines, sweet red wines, and it didn't have a good reputation. But now it has changed again, and people have realized that Lemberger by itself can be a really good, high quality variety. Yeah, and I was going to say something else, but I forgot it.
Okay, then maybe I say something about the wine, because I just tasted it.
Okay.
And,
I feel you have a lot of sour cherry flavor.
That's dark cherry. That's what I wanted to say. But it has kind of quite high acidity, right? I would guess it's more like 6, 7 at least, right?
Yeah. Sometimes it can be even higher than some of the Rieslings, and that's because this is in a parcel of the Häder, which is almost facing northern direction. Mm-hmm. And so it's quite cold, and that's why we always have quite a strong acidity. Mm-hmm. And that's also one of my favorite Lembergers in the portfolio. Because of the acidity, it feels so juicy, and you get the juiciness that on the one side, this wine is a perfect wine for partying and drinking. because it's so juicy. But on the other side, it has still a lot of complexity and structure that it can be a really good pairing for food, especially with meat and red meat maybe. And it also can easily compete with the GGs, with the große Lage, because of the complexity and the structure.
Yeah, I actually come from Hungary, so we also have kékfrankos. And what I like is roasted duck with this kind of stuff.
That's perfect. Exactly, that's perfect.
It's hard to beat, yeah. But it's more complex. So I would say it's not on because some people say, yeah, it's Eastern Europe's Pinot Noir, but I don't think it is. It's more on the darker side, and it has some peppery notes, which sometimes reminds me of an elegant Syrah, so not a Shiraz, but more like an elegant kind of style. But it also has some kind of like a sweeter, milder kind of coffee, or almost chocolatey or cacao, or kind of. This is. Was it also in oak or?
Yeah, that was in French oak, but neutral oak only. So that is but 2 or 3 years of using. So it's still young, but it's not new.
And do you think these wines could age?
Yeah, definitely.
And how long would you say?
I don't know. 10 years. I would say 10 years is not a problem for those wines.
What was the oldest that you tried?
From the Häder?
For example, yeah.
I think Häder, we are only producing Häder as a single vineyard wine since 2014. We don't have such a long tradition because before that we were not following the new classification system of the VDP. Before that, that Lemberger that we were producing was called Lemberger S, and it was a blend of different vineyards. And the Häder we started doing in 2014, I think. Yeah.
And how is this decision made? Like, which one is the Erste Lage and Große Lage? So,
well, basically the VDP, the regional or the region chapter decides which vineyard site is going to be Erste Lage and which one is going to be Große Lage. And and the Große Lage was already defined, so pretty much the other vineyards were supposed to be Erste Lage or just for allowed for Ortswein production.
And it's not gonna be changing in the future, so it's kind of written in stone?
No, it's not written in stone, I think. I mean, it should be. But sometimes there are vineyard sites that are not used maybe from a VDP member, so they are not defined, for example. And also sometimes if you have a new parcel in a vineyard site, that you can also use the name of the Givan. You don't have to necessarily use the name of the vineyard site. And if you name the Givan is like parcel name, for example, but officially written in the maps of the German landscape measuring, then you can also use that. And then sometimes there can happen some changes, and some wines can jump from Erste Lage to Große Lage, from Große Lage to Erste Lage. But this is really not happening very often. Yeah, but if you, for example, if you make a bad wine from the Große Lage and it's not good enough, then it can happen that you are not allowed to give it the name Große Lage. And so if you're not allowed to call it Große Lage, then you are also not allowed to use the name of the single vineyard. So for example, if my Pulvermecher is really bad one year, then I'm not allowed to name it or to declare it as Pulvermecher.
And do you usually do like, or do you also do cuvées with Lemberger, or?
Yeah, we have the Y in our winery, and I know that in other wineries they also do a lot of blendings with Lemberger. We, for example, do it for the Y, which is our heavy style red wine blend. It is made from 60% of Lemberger and 20% Cabernet Sauvignon and 20% Cabernet Franc.
Mhm.
And that's 2 years in French oak and 1/3 is in new oak.
Mhm. And that's a more heavier style, and do you do it every year or?
Yeah, we do it every year, and it's a definitely more heavier style. Also, the Cabernet vineyards, both of them are in one of the very rare southern-facing vineyards in Stettener,
Mhm. Okay.
and also quite steep, so they get a lot of sun, and
Mhm.
it's a really warm vineyard actually.
So you go sometimes above 13.5, right?
Yes. We also, I think for the Ypsilon, in at least in during my father's time, we also had 14.5 sometimes.
Wow, okay. And do you also try other Lembergers, like from Austria or Hungary or Slovakia or?
Of course. I'm not sure if it was 3 years ago or 4 years ago. We were traveling to Burgenland in Austria, and I know a lot of Austrian winemakers that I try to make wine exchanges from time to time. Same like I do with Riesling or also with Pinot and Chardonnay. I try to always have a wine exchange with my colleagues, so I can try and taste what other winemakers are producing. And so I'm always curious in Lembergers from other regions with a different terroir. And for example, the one that is coming from the farthest away is from Fox Run Vineyards in New York. Okay. And they also have Lemberger in New York State.
Wow, I didn't know that. And how is the style there?
It's hard to describe it because I only tried it on a fair. It's also very peppery, and I have 3 bottles in the trash room actually, but I haven't opened them yet. And I know the winemaker because he was traveling through Germany a couple of years ago, and he was visiting the winery and tasted the Lembergers, and then I gave him, because he was traveling, I gave him 1 bottle of the GG as a present. And years later, we met again at the Vivinum in Vienna, in Austria, and because of there used to be every year of the Vivinum, there used to be a Blaufränkisch, Keckfränkisch, and Lemberger tasting, where his winery 2 or 3 years ago also took part, and that's where we met again by accident. And then we since then we are in contact on social media, and I can't wait to visit him on the winery. But at the moment it's a bit tough to travel to the United States, unfortunately.
Yeah, I also can't wait to visit you. I'm also in Württemberg now, but it's
yeah, you should come over. I mean, 2 people, it's not too bad. We can have distance.
Right, you know what, I will. I don't care. I want to see your winery. And do you plan to open for tastings in the future, or how is the situation now?
For tastings, unfortunately, it's not allowed. But for shopping, it's allowed. And I mean, you can come for a private visit, and we can have a bottle together. I mean, we can have a tasting, but not a public tasting.
Yeah. Okay, like a secret tasting of Lembergers.
Exactly, with distance.
Obviously.
A secret distance tasting.
Let it be. Okay, Moritz, thank you very much. Do you want to add something?
To add something? No. People keep on drinking, and develop, discover the world of wine. And no, I don't want to add anything.
Okay,
thank you. It was a lot of fun with you. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I cannot wait to meet you in person. And I hope that you bring some Keckfränkisch from Hungary.
I hope so too. Thank you very much. It was really nice to talk to you, Moritz.
Okay, bye-bye. See you soon.
Bye. Have a nice evening.
You too. Thank you.